Camera, action.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another review. Today we're going to be talking about the newest horror comedy, Buddy. So essentially, Buddy is this movie about these kids that are on this TV show that is hosted by this unicorn named Buddy, and as the show tends to go on, they start to notice that things aren't quite right and things take a real sinister turn. So this was a movie that I heard rumblings about from film festivals throughout the beginning of the year, and I was really excited for it because I like this whole concept of twisted, demented kids TV shows or like something in the vein of that. I thought the one that came to Hulu a few years ago, Mr. Crockett, was really good. I really hope maybe at some point we will see a sequel to that. I don't know, but that one I really enjoyed. And while that movie had more of like this Nightmare on Elm Street kind of feel to the vibe of it, this one's very much more in the slasher territory with some really dark comedy mixed in. And I have to say, I had no idea what to expect from this movie. I've only ever seen the little teaser trailers, but this thing was just outrageously funny. And like, I can't lie to you, I had a really good time with this movie. So starting off with some of the stuff I really enjoyed about Buddy, and one being is I really, really enjoy the setting of this movie. I think this whole vibe of this TV show and all that stuff, I think it's a really cool concept, like I just talked about. I think it's really cool to take something in that world that is so innocent and supposed to be real, like this innocent thing to it, and really twisting it and turning it into something really messed up and evil and even like very darkly comedic in its own way. And I feel like for people that kind of grew up with shows like this, like in the 90s, like especially like Barney, for example, Barney I feel like is a huge inspiration for this movie. And like for me, I grew up when I was really small. I watched a lot of Barney. So this is a movie that I feel like if you kind of have those ties to shows like that, you kind of get this nostalgic feeling about it because they do a really great job of capturing a lot of what those TV shows are, down to, the set designs, the colors, the idea of the entire show about how trying to learn these lessons and teach kids stuff as the episode goes along, even the songs and whatnot that they do. So they do a really good job with that. And I think if, like I said, if you grew up with that, I think there's a little bit of a nostalgic tie there that kind of adds into the movie a little bit for you. And that's another thing I loved about the movie, like I just talked about. They get everything down to the T of this movie, like one of those old school TV shows looked. Like they nail it, like down to every little detail, even the whimsical music that plays all throughout it, which also adds like a really darkly comedic theme throughout the movie. But they just do a damn good job when it comes to really getting the set design and the sound design and everything down like they're making a real kids TV show. So they just did a great job across the board with that. One of the other things I really enjoyed about this movie was that the entire runtime of this movie, I had no clue at all where this movie was going to go. Like, it really throws you in every single kind of direction. Like, when the movie first starts, for example, you're watching essentially almost like 3 episodes of this buddy show. But, like, as each episode goes, things get a little bit worse and a little bit worse, and it just becomes more and more twisted and sadistic as it goes along. And then all of a sudden it does like this hard cut into the real world where, you don't know how many years later it's been, if it's in the same timeline or anything. You're just kind of thrown into this other world. It reminded me a lot of Barbarian, like when they had that big needle drop where all of a sudden you're following Justin Long in California for a little bit. This one is very similar to that because when it cuts to this family out of nowhere, you're like, okay, well, how is this going to connect with this? And how is this really going to turn around to this? And there's multiple points like in the movie where they just keep throwing you all these different directions, and you're like, I don't know where this movie's going to go, but I'm fully on board for this because I'm having such a good time. I actually really like the idea and concept of this whole idea of Buddy, too. I think Buddy could be a really cool, maybe even a horror icon if the world in the movies kept going, for example. But I like the world that this is set in because it kind of gives you that setting of, like, it is make-believe. And with that, there's all these different scenarios you could do. And in the world that we're in, it could be any kind of idea, and it could be absolutely outlandish. And I think with how they go about setting things up and the world that they've built, it would work. Like, it doesn't matter what it could do, because it could easily be played for laughs. And so, like, whatever you wanted to do, I feel like the sky was the limit. And it's the same way with sequels. I feel like in this world, they could have endless amounts of ideas of things that they wanted to do, and maybe different things that they wanted to explore, and maybe dive deeper into certain things. So, like, really, I think it's really cool how they set all that up in this movie, but they leave enough, to the imagination to the end of it, to where it leaves you wanting more. You want to see more of this world. And that's something I just really appreciated about it. And that goes to one of the biggest compliments about this movie, is that I love the fact that it knows what type of movie it is, and it leans 100% into that. It knows that the whole concept and the idea of this whole show and everything is absolutely ridiculous. So the filmmakers decided to really lean into that and really make it funny and really know the type of movie that they're making. And they don't hold any of that stuff back. And I just really appreciate it that they didn't take things too seriously. Like, they really leaned into what they had. And because I think they did that up front, I think a lot of people will really enjoy that more going into it. Because the theater I was in, the whole theater was dying laughing. Like, they were busting out laughing watching this movie. So it's one of those things that I appreciated, that I'm glad they didn't take things too seriously and tried to make it real dark and gritty. And even though it is dark, it's very dark, but it has that comedic edge to it. And like I said, the mixture is just really great. And that's really another thing about the movie I really loved, was really the whole mixture of how they went about doing horror and comedy and gore and darkness and all that stuff to it. I think they do a really great job of finding that fine line where it's not way too much of one or way too much of the other. I feel like this could almost be a gateway horror movie for people that's not really into horror movie, minus some of the gore, which I'll get into in a minute, because it is very gory, but it is very darkly comedic. There is so much stuff in here that is so twisted, but yet very lighthearted in moments, because it's also trying to be a kids' TV show. But it finds those balances of being like really like gory in the moments that it needs to be gory, or really silly and over the top, and really just, it finds that fine line and it rides it perfectly through the entire movie. And I feel like that's kind of a hard thing to do, because really I feel like trying to do a horror comedy is really difficult, because you don't want to have one outdo the other. And in this one, I felt like even though I wasn't really scared, or the movie wasn't really scary by any means, it still had those horrific elements to it with the gore and the darkness that it does go to, but it also had that great dark comedy that I love so much. And like I said, the balance in this movie for all of it through the entire thing was just really damn well done. And now talking about the gore, I think the gore is really good in this movie as well. It's not as gory as I thought it would be. That I heard a lot of people kind of talking it up, that it was pretty brutal. And yes, it is absolutely brutal and bloody at certain points in the movie, but I don't think it goes as far as I thought it would be. But there is elements of, like, where stuff happens with these kids, and I know that can be a big turnoff for a lot of people, but you don't really see a lot of that when it comes to the children. And honestly, most of that is really played more for laughs than anything else. Like, a lot of it is really never to be dark or sadistic or anything in that moment. But I think if you have a really dark, twisted sense of humor, you will find a lot of comedic moments in that, because I think that's really what it's going for. And that's another thing I love, is that I love the fact that they used practical effects. I love the fact that they used real sets and actually, had people there on the sets build the sets, and a lot of the gore was practical. You actually had people in the suits, wearing the suits around. And I just think that's just really great. I champion movies so much when they are done practically, because it goes such a long way. And to me, it shows more that, the filmmaker cares enough in that aspect to be like, no, I want to do this practically because I want it to feel real, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that, when people have to use CGI or anything like that they don't care, but using practical effects, especially like a low budget movie like this, it just goes such a long way. So I really champion movies and filmmakers and whatnot that do that. And the gore looks really good in this movie. Like, most of the practical stuff they use and do is really well done. Like I said, there's some stuff that's silly and over the top, but that's what it's going for, and they really nail that with what, it needs to be. The other thing I really appreciate about this movie is that you never really know where this TV show comes from, or where Buddy comes from, or the whole idea behind Buddy or anything like that. they kind of leave that up to your interpretation. Now, that might piss a lot of people off or kind of steer people in the wrong direction, but I kind of like that because I like the fact that it's more mysterious that way. And honestly, as this movie went on, that never really crossed my mind. It's like, oh man, I hope we get an answer to what Buddy is or where he came from or where this TV show originated from or anything like that. None of that really came to mind for me. I was so focused on the story and what was going on with these kids and this family and whatnot. So I was mainly more focused on that than anything else. And that, and like I was having such a good time with the humor throughout it that, like I said, none of that really entered my mind at all. And like I said, it made me appreciate it more at the end of the day because it makes Buddy as this entity or whatever he is scarier, in my opinion. I think it's better not knowing things than having an answer to something. I think whatever it is that you create in your own mind is a million times scarier than anything that can ever be or have an explanation put to it. They're just like, I don't need to know why Michael Myers is the way that he is. He's just pure evil. That's all I need to know. And I think that's what makes him tick and what makes those movies work, most of them. But that's what makes most of them work. And it's the same way with Buddy. Even like they kind of give some little hints maybe near the end of the movie about like this bigger thing that's kind of going on about where the broadcast and stuff is coming from, but it's never really mentioned or never really, solved or anything like that. And I was okay with that. Like I said, that's something, in my opinion, that really made me appreciate the movie more. And like I said, just made the entity of Buddy scarier at the end of the day. Now, I think the acting overall in this movie is great. I think it's, it's fun for what it is. I mean, yes, you have child actors, but I think the child actors are funny. I think there's a lot of moments that they have back and forth with each other that is really funny. I also had no idea that Keegan-Michael Key was the voice of Buddy, and now when I have to watch this movie again just for that, because I had no clue he was the voice for that. But some of his line deliveries for certain things is absolutely hysterical. Like when he's trying to be serious and when he's trying to cut back into being that kid-friendly unicorn for the show or whatever, it's hysterical. Like I think his line delivery on certain things is absolutely just funny as shit. Kristen Milioti is also in this movie as well. I hope that I said her name correctly. Like I said, it does this thing with her character to where she shows up like randomly. Like I said, she's part of that family that I talked about earlier that's just randomly, there, and you're like, okay, let's see how this goes. But she really does this thing in this movie where she is trying to figure out things in her own life, and she's almost about to have this mental breakdown when we meet her character. And I'm trying to tiptoe around why, because I don't want to give anything about this movie away because it was something I didn't know. Like I said, I didn't know nothing about this movie, but it's one of those things that she has to pull that off very well. And then when something else happens and she gets drawn into something else, let's just say that she has to play like almost this other character, and it's almost like her attitude has to switch until she ends up going back and getting her memory back for certain things. Again, I'm trying to be vague and not confusing, but I'm also trying not to give anything away. But I think she's really good. I think the whole, the dad is played by Topher Grace. It's good to see him back in here because you rarely see Topher Grace in anything anymore. So it's good to see him back. He's funny in some of the line deliveries he has to give, because he's having these arguments and fights with his wife that he just doesn't believe a lot of the shit that's going on. So all that together just really made for this really enjoyable thing in this movie and really funny. And I feel like, after this movie was over, I thought to myself I wonder if this is what Eli Roth was trying to go for with Ice Cream Man, with that comedic tone with these kids, where Buddy succeeded on about damn near every level for me, where Ice Cream Man really fell flat. And like I said, it wasn't really the kids' fault in Ice Cream Man. It was really more of the writing and whatnot. But in this movie, like I said, they're the way that, I don't know if it's the way that they're directed or the way that everything is written or a good combination of both, or just the skills and the delivery of these kids. But there are certain lines that they're all through this movie that are just so funny. And now moving on to my mixed elements, and I'm trying to figure out how to say this without giving anything away. But when you get near the end of the movie, there's one particular kid and the stuff with the family and whatnot. So at some point, those worlds collide with each other. And you don't really get a lot of closure on the stuff with the family. It's kind of just left open, and I don't know if it's really left to your interpretation, but you're kind of just like, okay, so that's kind of left hanging there. You get closure in some ways, but not fully, not with everything else. Like I said, it's very hard to talk about without giving it away. But you don't get really full closure, and like I said, I know a lot of times that can really irritate people and really steer them the wrong way, where it doesn't wrap everything up in that nice little bow. And this one does not. Like I said, it leaves you on that thing of where, yes, this may be the outcome for it, but you don't know 100%. The other one being is I really don't know how many people will actually really enjoy this movie, because I think it's weird because I don't know how to gauge it, because this movie's so all over the place, but not in a bad way. I mean, it is literally so all over the place that I didn't know where, like I said, the movie was going to go. I didn't know what turns it was going to take. There were certain moments in the movie where I literally went, yo, what the fuck is happening? And because of so much back and forth and maybe that tonal shift going back and forth, it might not be for everybody. This might not be a movie that people will go see and be like, yeah, I didn't see what the hype was about it, or I didn't see what all the, buzz for the comedic side of it because I didn't find it funny, or something like that. It just depends on, I think, who you are and what type of sense of humor that you have. But then again, at the same time, I don't know, because like I said, I went to go see this at the secret screening, and this was a movie that I expected that most people, once they found out it was Buddy, would probably walk out and leave. But literally, the theater I was in was packed, and a lot of people stayed, and they laughed their ass off throughout this entire movie. So I could be wrong. This could be a movie that ends up appealing to everybody, and I could be entirely wrong. I just didn't think it would be one of those movies that, because the tone and the direction and everything else is all over the place, that people might be like, yo, this is just not for me. But I could be entirely wrong. My other mixed thing is that this is absolutely a movie that you will have to shut your brain off and just go along for the ride, because there's so much outlandish stuff in this movie that without a doubt you have to just shut your brain off and be like, okay, I'm going into this. I know what I'm getting into from the first minute of this movie. So I can't take anything too seriously. I have to be like, this is ridiculous, and everything in this movie is going to be ridiculous. I'm not expecting Citizen Kane or anything out of this movie, but this is going to be ridiculous. So it's one of those things that, I know that can be a hard thing for people to really shut their brain off when it comes to certain things and not nitpick every little thing about how that wouldn't happen or this wouldn't happen. Trust me, I know people in my life that are like that. So if you're one of those people, that will probably absolutely bother you. But if you can just turn your brain off and just let this movie take you on a ride, you might really have a good time with it. My only negative about the movie, and it's really more of a nitpick than it is anything else, is I feel like there is certain points in the movie where the pacing can be just a little bit off. Like a little bit of stuff where I feel like a lot of stuff can be going on, and then it comes really to a screeching halt for, a few minutes, and then it kind of gets back on that pace again. But it's nothing really that ever really takes you out of the movie or makes you sit there absolutely hating your life while you're watching this or anything. You're still absolutely entertained, and you're still enthralled with the story that's going on. So that's really, really probably my only nitpick negative about this whole movie. So Buddy is one of those movies that I think that if it wasn't on your radar, you should definitely put it on your radar. Or if you were curious to check it out, I do recommend checking it out in the theater. I think it's fun, and it's got that slasher element to it that I really like and enjoy, but it also has that really great twisted, dark, comedic stuff in it as well that they pull off brilliantly. But I think if you do go see it, try to go see it with a full house. I think if you see it with other people, that whole thing of laughter is contagious. I think you'll find it more enjoyable that way. But it was a really good movie. But at the same time, I thought to myself this is like waking up in the middle of a fever dream and being like, what the fuck is happening throughout this movie? I know that this movie was created by one of the guys that did Too Many Cooks. I think that's the name of the show. It was on Adult Swim. I had never seen it. It was one of those things that I don't know if I was still watching Adult Swim when it came out. I don't know how new or old or anything that it is. So I don't know anything about that show. I just know it was one of the creators from that. And a lot of people that are familiar with that show, what I was reading was that they didn't really care for the movie all that much. So, and they really assumed that people that, had no clue about what that show was would enjoy the movie more. And that very well may be the case, because it's a show that I have no idea when it started, how long it's been going, or I don't know anything about it. I just know it was in kind of the same vein as Buddy, but it has that horror comedic element to it. So this is one that I would absolutely recommend, and I'd probably go check out in the theater if you get the chance to. It is really good. And if you don't get the chance to, I highly recommend renting it on VOD whenever it comes out. Like I said, it might be a good gateway movie depending on how you are with gore, but like I said, it doesn't go as gory as I thought it would, And a lot of that gory moments throughout the movie are really played more for laughs than anything else. So this is kind of really a good kickoff movie for spooky season. So we're right near the tail end of August. So this is a good one to kick it off with, I would say. So thank you, everybody. That is my review for Buddy. If this is the review that you're finding me on, please come over to the channel and check out all my other 2026 reviews so far. I'd love to have you over there. If you have seen Buddy, please comment below and let me know what you thought about it. I would absolutely love to know what your thoughts are about this movie, and specifically maybe what scenes you found funny or didn't find funny, or if things worked for you or didn't. I'm curious either way. Let's talk about it down below. And as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. That way I can see all of you beautiful people in the next one. Thank you so very, very much.